3 days ago, my phone rang at 2 in the morning. The screen showed a number I had blocked 3 years earlier. Somehow the call still came through. When I answered, I heard my mother crying so hard she could barely breathe. This was the same woman who once told me I was the biggest disappointment of her life. Now she was begging me to come home. To understand why this moment happened, I need to take you back to where it all began. Before we dive into this story, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If you enjoy stories about family drama redemption and finding your own strength, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me tell you how my so-called perfect family fell completely apart. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody, and secrets never stay hidden for long. My father worked as an electrician, putting in long hours to keep the lights on and food on our table. My mother worked part-time as a nurse at the local clinic. We were a typical middle-class family, nothing fancy but comfortable enough. Everything changed when I was 7 years old. That was the year my little sister Emma was born. From the moment she came into this world, it was like someone flipped a switch in our household. Suddenly I became invisible in my own home. Emma was immediately labeled the princess of the family. My parents called her their little angel, their gift from heaven, their miracle baby. Meanwhile, I was the stubborn one, the difficult child, the boy who never listened. I could not understand what I had done wrong. I was just a kid trying to figure out my place in a family that seemed to have forgotten I existed. I remember my 10th birthday like it was yesterday. My mother had promised me a small party with my friends from school. She even bought a chocolate cake, my favorite, and put it in the refrigerator the night before. I went to bed that night feeling excited for the first time in months. The next morning, Emma woke up crying. She was only 3 years old, and she had seen a commercial for an amusement park on television. She wanted to go right then and there, screaming and throwing herself on the floor until her face turned red. Instead of telling her no, my parents looked at each other and made a decision that broke something inside me. We spent my birthday at the amusement park watching Emma ride the kiddie rides while I sat on benches waiting. When we finally got home that night, everyone was too tired for cake. My birthday cake sat forgotten in the refrigerator for a week until my mother finally threw it away. She never even apologized. When Emma turned 5, my parents decided she needed her own room. The problem was I already had the only spare bedroom in the house. Without any discussion, they told me to pack my things and move down to the basement. The basement was cold, damp, and smelled like mildew. There were spiders in the corners and the ceiling leaked when it rained. But Emma needed a pretty pink room with butterflies on the walls, so down I went. I tried to convince myself that things would get better. I told myself that Emma was just a little kid and that she needed more attention. I believed that if I worked hard enough and made my parents proud, they would eventually see me too. So I threw myself into school. I studied every night, earned straight A grades, and made the varsity basketball team as a sophomore. I thought my parents would be proud. I thought they would finally show up for me. They never came to a single game, not one. The excuse was always the same. Someone had to stay home with Emma. She could not be left alone. She might get scared. She might need something. Meanwhile, I would scan the bleachers before every game, hoping to see their faces, and every single time I was disappointed. When I was 17, I received a partial scholarship to attend a state university. It was not a full ride, but it was something I had earned through years of hard work. I could not wait to tell my parents. I ran home from school that day, burst through the front door, and announced the news with a huge smile on my face. My father barely looked up from his newspaper. He said only a partial scholarship. Huh? Why could you not work harder and get a full one? Then he went back to reading like I was not even there. That same year, Emma brought home a report card full of C grades. My parents took her out to dinner at her favorite restaurant to celebrate. They said she had tried her best, and that was all that mattered. I sat in my basement room that night, listening to them laugh upstairs, and wondered what trying my best would ever get me. I started working at 16 bussing tables at a diner after school and on weekends. I saved every penny I earned because I knew my parents would never help me with college. I bought my own car, a beat-up Honda with over 150,000 miles on it. I paid for my own clothes, my own school supplies, my own everything. I asked my parents for nothing because I knew the answer would always be no. Through it all, I kept hoping. I kept believing that someday they would wake up and realize how unfair they had been. I held on to that hope like a lifeline, even as it grew thinner and thinner with each passing year. As Emma grew into her teenage years, her behavior became increasingly entitled. She had learned from a young age that crying and screaming got her whatever she wanted, and she refined those skills into a precise art form. When Emma turned 16, she demanded a brand new car for her birthday. Not a used car, not a hand-me-down, but a shiny new Honda Civic straight from the dealership. My parents, who had never given me a single dollar toward my rusty old vehicle, happily obliged. They even put a giant red bow on it, just like in the commercials. I was 23 years old at the time, working my way up at an information technology company, while still driving that same beat-up car I had bought as a teenager. I watched my parents hand Emma the keys to her new car and tried not to let the bitterness show on my face. Emma started talking back to my parents around this time. She would roll her eyes when they asked her to do chores. She would slam doors and scream that she hated them whenever they told her no. But instead of disciplining her, my parents made excuses. They said it was just a phase. They said all teenagers act this way. They said she would grow out of it. She did not grow out of it. She grew into it. Every time something went wrong in Emma's life, somehow it became my fault. When she failed her driving test the first time, my mother called me to yell about how I had set a bad example. When Emma got caught cheating on a test at school, my father said it was because I had never been around to help her study. I was the family scapegoat, the person they blamed for everything, so they would never have to look at their own failures. The breaking point came at my best friend's wedding. Derek and I had been close since our freshman year of college. He was the brother I never had, the person who actually showed up for me when my own family would not. When he asked me to be his best man, I was honored beyond words. I made the mistake of inviting my family to the wedding. I thought maybe things had changed. I thought maybe we could act like a normal family for just one day. I was wrong. Emma was 18 years old and had already developed a taste for alcohol, even though she was not legally old enough to drink. At the reception, she found her way to the open bar and started ordering drinks. Nobody checked her identification because she looked older and acted like she owned the place. By the time dinner was served, Emma was visibly intoxicated. She got into a loud argument with one of the bridesmaids over something petty. I do not even remember what it was about. Then she stumbled over to the head table where the bride was sitting and somehow managed to spill an entire glass of red wine all over the bride's white dress. The room went silent. Derek's new wife burst into tears. I rushed over to try to calm the situation and gently took Emma by the arm, suggesting that maybe she should step outside and get some fresh air. That was when my mother appeared. She had witnessed the whole disaster, but instead of being embarrassed by Emma's behavior, she turned her anger on me. In front of over 200 wedding guests, my mother jabbed her finger in my face and screamed at me. She said I was always picking on Emma. She said I was a bully and a terrible brother. She said I had ruined the wedding with my controlling behavior. She said I should be ashamed of myself. I stood there in my best man suit, surrounded by people I respected, while my mother publicly humiliated me for trying to prevent my drunk teenage sister from causing more damage. Derek's family looked at me with pity. My co-workers who had been invited whispered among themselves. I had never felt so small in my entire life. I did not say a word. I just walked away and spent the rest of the night helping the catering staff clean up the mess Emma had made. 1 week after the wedding, I drove to my parents' house. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say 100 times in my head. I was going to be calm. I was going to be rational. I was going to finally make them understand. We sat in the living room, my parents on the couch, and Emma sprawled in the recliner, scrolling through her phone like she could not care less. I took a deep breath and started talking. I told them about the years of feeling invisible. I told them about the birthday cake that got thrown away. I told them about the basement room and the basketball games they never attended. I told them about the scholarship they dismissed and the car they never helped me buy. I told them about how much it hurt to be blamed for everything while Emma got away with murder. My mother's response crushed whatever hope I had left. She looked at me with cold eyes and said I had always been jealous of Emma. She said I was selfish and that I only thought about myself. She said I was trying to tear the family apart because I could not stand seeing my sister happy. I looked at my father, hoping he would say anything to defend me. He just stared at the floor and said nothing. Emma finally looked up from her phone. She had this smirk on her face that I will never forget. She said I always had to play the victim, did I not? She said I was pathetic. Something inside me went quiet. Not angry, not sad, just quiet. I stood up from my chair and looked at each of them one last time. I said I was done. I told them I was finished with this family. I walked toward the front door without looking back. My mother's voice followed me, sharp and mocking. She yelled that I would come crawling back to them one day. She said I would be begging for their forgiveness soon enough. I closed the door behind me and drove away. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just drove until I could not see their house in my rearview mirror anymore. I moved to Denver, Colorado 2 weeks after walking out of my parents' house. I picked the city because it was far enough away that I would not be tempted to go back, but close enough to feel like I was still somewhere familiar. Starting over was not easy. I had my job skills and my savings, but I had no family support, no safety net, nothing to fall back on if things went wrong. For the first few months, I lived in a tiny studio apartment and ate ramen noodles for dinner most nights. But I was free. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. I threw myself into my work. I stayed late, took on extra projects, and volunteered for assignments nobody else wanted. Within a year, I had been promoted to team lead. 2 years after that, I became a project manager. I was building something for myself, something that nobody could take away from me. The most important decision I made was to start seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Patricia Hayes, and she helped me understand that the way my family treated me was not normal and was not my fault. She taught me about scapegoat dynamics and golden child syndrome. She helped me see that I had spent my whole life trying to earn love that should have been given freely. Therapy was hard. There were sessions where I cried so much I could barely speak. There were moments when I wanted to quit, to stuff everything back down and pretend I was fine. But I kept going because I knew I deserved better than the life I had been living. I also started building real friendships for the first time. In my old life, I had always kept people at a distance because I was afraid they would hurt me like my family had. In Denver, I let my guard down. I met people at work who became genuine friends. I joined a recreational basketball league and found a community of guys who actually showed up for each other. And then I met Sophia. She was a graphic designer at a company that worked with mine. We met at a conference, started talking over bad hotel coffee, and never really stopped. Sophia was kind, funny, and had this way of seeing through all my defenses without making me feel vulnerable. She had her own complicated family history, so she understood what I was going through without me having to explain everything. We started dating about 18 months after I moved to Denver. She was the first person I ever told the full story to, from the birthday cake to the basement room to the wedding disaster. She listened without judgment, and then she held my hand and said she was sorry that happened to me. Those simple words meant more than she could ever know. I had blocked my family's phone numbers and unfriended them all on social media. I wanted nothing to do with them, but information has a way of finding you, especially in the age of the internet. About 2 years after I left, I received a message on Facebook from my Aunt Linda. She was my mother's older sister, and she had always been kind to me when I was growing up. Her message was short and apologetic. She said she knew I had cut off contact with my parents, and she respected that decision, but she thought I should know what was happening. According to Aunt Linda, things had gotten bad, really bad. Emma had enrolled in college the fall after I left, but she dropped out after just 1 semester. She told my parents that school was too hard and that she needed time to figure out her life. Instead of pushing back, they let her move back home with no job, no responsibilities, and no plans for the future. A few months later, Emma started dating a guy named Tyler. Aunt Linda described him as bad news from the start. He had a history of drug problems and had been in and out of trouble with the law. Emma brought him home to live with her in my parents' house, and when they objected, she threatened to move out and never speak to them again, so they let him stay. My parents were now supporting not just Emma, but her deadbeat boyfriend too. They paid for everything while Emma and Tyler spent their days sleeping until noon and their nights partying. My father had to take on extra work to cover the bills. My mother looked tired and sad all the time. I read Aunt Linda's message and felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was not surprised at all. Another part of me felt vindicated, like the universe was finally proving what I had known all along. But mostly I just felt empty. These people had hurt me so deeply, and now they were suffering the consequences of their own choices. I did not know whether to feel sorry for them or to feel nothing at all. I thanked Aunt Linda for the information and told her I was not ready to reconnect with my parents. She said she understood and that she would always be there if I changed my mind. I tried to move on with my life, but more updates kept trickling in over the next year. The situation at my parents' house had escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. Emma had started becoming physically violent. The first incident happened when my mother refused to give Emma money for an expensive designer handbag. Emma flew into a rage and shoved my mother so hard that she fell backward and hit her head on the kitchen counter. My mother needed 3 stitches, but she told the emergency room doctors that she had slipped on a wet floor. My father tried to intervene after that. He sat Emma down and told her that her behavior was unacceptable, that she needed to get a job and start contributing to the household. Emma's response was chilling. She looked him dead in the eye and said that if he ever tried to tell her what to do again, she would call the police and tell them he had been abusing her for years. My father backed down. He was terrified of his own daughter. The violence continued. Emma threw a ceramic vase at my father's head when he canceled her credit card. She slapped my mother across the face when dinner was not ready on time. She punched holes in the walls when she did not get her way. My parents lived in constant fear, walking on eggshells in their own home, trying desperately to keep their golden child happy so she would not hurt them again. And then Emma made good on her threat. After my parents told her that Tyler had to move out because they could no longer afford to support him, Emma called Child Protective Services. She filed a report claiming that my parents had physically and emotionally abused her throughout her childhood. She made up stories about beatings, about being locked in closets, about being starved as punishment. Child Protective Services launched a full investigation. Even though Emma was 21 years old and the alleged abuse had happened years ago, the agency took the claims seriously. Social workers showed up at my parents' house. They interviewed neighbors and family members. My parents had to hire a lawyer to defend themselves against their own daughter's lies. The investigation eventually concluded that Emma's claims were unfounded. There was no evidence of abuse because there had been no abuse, but the damage was done. Word had spread through our small Ohio town. Neighbors who had known my parents for decades now looked at them with suspicion. My father was humiliated at work. My mother stopped leaving the house because she could not stand the whispers. The stress took a physical toll on my father. His blood pressure spiked so high that he had to be rushed to the hospital one night with chest pains. The doctor said he was lucky it was not a full heart attack, but he needed to reduce the stress in his life immediately. My mother, meanwhile, fell into a deep depression. She spent most of her days crying in her bedroom, wondering where she had gone wrong, how her perfect little princess had turned into a monster. The answer, of course, was staring them in the face. They had created Emma through years of spoiling and enabling. They had taught her that she could do no wrong, that her actions had no consequences, that the world owed her everything just for existing. And now they were living with the results of their own parenting. Which brings me back to that phone call at 2 a.m. My mother could barely speak through her tears. She told me everything that had happened, as if I did not already know. She told me about the violence, the threats, the false report to Child Protective Services. She told me about my father's health scare and her own depression. She told me that they were scared to live in their own home. And then she said the words I never thought I would hear. She said she was sorry. She said they had been wrong to treat me the way they did. She said they should have listened to me years ago. She said they needed me. My father got on the phone after that. His voice sounded different than I remembered, tired and broken. He apologized too. He said he should have stood up for me. He said he had failed me as a father. He said he did not expect me to forgive them, but he wanted me to know the truth. They asked me to come home. They said they needed my help to deal with Emma, to fix the situation, to save the family. I sat in the darkness of my bedroom, listening to my parents cry and beg, and I felt something I did not expect. I felt peace. I told them I forgave them. I meant it. Holding on to anger and resentment had only ever hurt me, and I had worked too hard in therapy to let those feelings back into my life. Forgiveness was not about letting them off the hook. It was about freeing myself from the weight I had been carrying. But I also told them I could not come back. I explained that I was not going to return home to be the family rescuer. I was not going to clean up the mess they had created with Emma. That was not my responsibility. It never had been. I told them they needed professional help. They needed a therapist who could help them understand the family dynamics that had led to this disaster. They needed a lawyer who could advise them on how to protect themselves from Emma's threats and violence. They needed to learn how to set boundaries, something they had never done in their entire lives. Most importantly, they needed to accept that the situation with Emma was not something I could fix. They had spent over 20 years making her who she was. Undoing that damage, if it was even possible, would take years of hard work and professional intervention. It was not a problem that could be solved by bringing back the scapegoat son. I told my father to take care of his health. I told my mother to find a therapist for herself. I told them both that I loved them because despite everything I did, still loved them. But I also loved myself now, and that meant I could not sacrifice my own well-being for people who had never sacrificed anything for me. My mother cried harder when I said no. My father was silent for a long time. Finally, he said he understood. He said he was proud of the man I had become, even if he had played no part in making me that way. I ended the call and sat alone in the quiet of my apartment. Sophia woke up and came to find me. She did not ask what happened. She just sat down beside me and held my hand until the sun came up. I realized in that moment that I had truly healed. The phone call that would have destroyed me 3 years ago had instead shown me how far I had come. I was no longer the scapegoat, the invisible child, the disappointment. I was Marcus, a man who had built his own life and found his own family and learned to love himself. I do not know what will happen to Emma. Maybe she will hit rock bottom and finally get the help she needs. Maybe she will continue down her destructive path until there is nothing left. It is not up to me to decide her fate. I do not know if my parents will ever truly change. Maybe the crisis they are facing will finally open their eyes. Maybe they will slip back into their old patterns the moment things calm down. That is not up to me either. What I do know is this: you cannot change how other people treat you, but you can always choose how you respond. Sometimes walking away is not giving up. Sometimes it is the only way to save yourself. And forgiveness is not about allowing people to keep hurting you. Forgiveness is about releasing yourself from the prison of resentment. I am free now. I have a career. I am proud of friends who genuinely care about me, and a woman who loves me for exactly who I am. I built all of this with my own 2 hands, without any help from the people who were supposed to support me from the beginning. And sometimes, that is all you really need. If this story resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic family situation? How did you find the strength to put yourself first? Leave a comment below and share your experience. Your story might help someone else who is going through something similar. If you found value in this video, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And if you have not already subscribed to this channel, so you do not miss future stories about overcoming adversity and finding your own path. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope that wherever you are in your journey, you find the courage to choose yourself and the peace that comes with true freedom. Take care of yourselves, and remember that you deserve love and respect, especially from the people closest to you.